Preparations continue for the inauguration of the Tinubu presidency on May 29. We continue with expectations of Nigerians from the new administration. Tonight, the question is, can the Tinubu presidency achieve stable, affordable, and sustainable electricity with his 6-point power sector plan contained in his Renewed Hope campaign manifesto? Arise News correspondent Nkechi Nnanna tells us more.
We have no blinker of electricity. They spend more than $60 billion. They forget that transmission line is a super highway for generated electricity and power. They could not even make a down payment for a roasted corn for that electricity.
Nigeria's power sector has been sick for decades, and the need to rekindle its potential to drive the country's industrial capabilities is overdue. President-elect Bola Tinubu identifies lack of power as a major impediment to national development. In his campaign manifesto, he promises to consolidate on President Buhari's already existing projects in the sector while establishing new interventions to tackle the issues of power transmission and distribution. Plan 1 focuses on putting an end to estimated billing and intends to ensure that all homes and businesses connected to the grid are metered by building on President Buhari's administration's National Mass Metering Program, Net Meter Asset Providers Scheme, and mandates distribution companies to charge cost-reflective tariffs for power supply. A plan, Tinubu says, if he does not achieve in 4 years, Nigerians should vote him out.
By all means necessary, you must have electricity. And you will not pay for estimated bill anymore. A promise made will be a promise kept. If I can't keep the promise and I come back for second term, don't vote for me. That's the truth. Unless I give you adequate reasons why I couldn't deliver.
In a bid to foster continuity, Plan 2 focuses on encouraging the domestic manufacturing of prepaid meters by reducing import levies on manufacturing inputs and providing other forms of support for domestic manufacturers. Under Buhari's administration, the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission has empowered over 90 prepaid meter manufacturers in the country. Plan 3 focuses on solar energy and projects to continue working with stakeholders to increase Nigeria's solar energy capacity and create more opportunities for policy development and increase investments to enable more solar-based projects for households and businesses. Plan 4 aims to increase rural electrification by streamlining and relaxing regulations to enable the private sector and local and state government actors to electrify rural Nigeria safely and securely. This is another Buhari administration project that Tinubu will build on, following the Rural Electrification Agency mandated to increase energy access in Nigeria's rural areas. Plan 5 focuses on gas to power and aims to create policies to enable gas resources to be harnessed on a priority 1 basis, to be used to generate power and support power projects that can be delivered quickly to optimize power grid reliability, grid interconnectedness, and grid wheeling. According to Tinubu's manifesto, in Plan 6, he will push for a review and update the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 to reform the regulatory and governance structure of the country's power sector. He also plans to expand Nigeria's power base to include clean coal, solar, hydropower, and other sustainable energy technologies. Ahead of his inauguration, Nigerians are hoping that Tinubu's plans are more than a paper policy. They want to see a record decline in the number of people without access to electricity, as well as significant improvement in electricity supply. But if things remain the same, the efforts of the incoming administration to transform the power sector may be a mirage. Nkechi Nana, Arise News.
For more on Tinubu's plans to revitalize the power sector, we joined by the Managing Director of Azura Power, Edu Okeke, and Arise analyst Dr. Sam Amadi pretty much later will be joining us. He's a former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Okeke, good to see you and thanks for your time. Quickly here, the first question many Nigerians will be asking, the old NEPA, by now we know was actually unbundled. We now have the generation, transmission, and the distribution. Perhaps maybe that's where we start from. Let's look at a key concern from the generation angle, which concerns you specifically.
Yes, the old NEPA was unbundled, and the plan, the essence of the unbundling of the old NEPA was to invite private investors into the sector. That was the overall goal. And to invite them, government created what we call the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC. And because, let's step back. Yeah. There are two ways for you to have enough capacity in Nigeria. Either the government does it or private sector comes in. And each of them, government will have to make a political decision. So when you now think of the old NEPA, government had everything. Then government said, we don't have enough money to be able to do everything that is needed for Nigerians to have enough power. So we are going to unbundle it. We are going to retain the transmission, and then we privatize the generation and distribution. Now, by doing that, we expected that more generation would be built in Nigeria. And the only way to do that was for us to guarantee investment in the upstream sector. That's the generation and gas space. The only way to guarantee that investment was for MBET to shield them from the delinquency that was happening at the distribution end. Unfortunate thing that happened is simply that since MBET was created, government reneged on that plan. MBET never for once shielded the generation and distribution and transmission end. And what you've seen in Nigeria is that in the last 10 years, actually 15 years, the only power plant that has been built in Nigeria is the Azura Power project. Private investors, they've all disappeared because they don't see a path towards recovery of their investment. Now we are now left with a situation where government is now in a fix, whereby do we ask the private sector to come in again, or do we muzzle in ourselves? But the problem we have with Nigeria is that government does not have enough resources to be able to invest the enormous amount required for the sector.
All right, let's bring in Dr. Sam Amadi, of course, former regulator himself. Thank you very much. Good we could reconnect with you. Now, let's talk about, Dr. Okeke just made some points here, the delinquency at the disco's end, and also says that the GENCOs and the TCN really have been exposed unduly. But where do you think the problem lies? There have been calls for a review of the privatization of the discos and all of that. Situate it for us. Let's understand exactly what's happening with the power sector and the promises being made by Tinubu.
Well, thank you. I think I built on Edu's where I stopped. Yes, the whole idea of privatization, and in fact, privatization is just a piece of the whole reform, which starts with unbundling, liberalization, and of course commercialization, and ultimately privatization, was to get a sustainable approach to power financing and power management. And that is
with Dr. Sam Amadi's connection there, we will go back, of course, as quickly as possible. Mr. Okeke, I mean, you heard that question, right?
Yes, I do.
I'm sure you have one or two things to say about that.
Yeah, yes. So because we've not been able to shield. Private sector investors, they've all disappeared coming into the sector. We keep talking about cost-reflective tariff for this and that.
Yeah.
But what is actually cost-reflective tariff? That's the question nobody has asked. It's almost like the whole Abuja here where we are sitting. Yeah. If everybody in Abuja is hungry and you have only a bag of rice, what is the cost-reflective tariff for that bag of rice? Because everybody is hungry. We don't have enough generating capacity in Nigeria. It doesn't matter where you increase the tariff to.
Why don't we have enough generating capacity?
Because unfortunately, we've not invested in so many years. The average power on the grid today is 4,000 megawatts. Nigerians will need at least 30,000 megawatts for everything we need. So we don't have enough capacity. If we don't have enough capacity, cost-reflective tariff goes out of the window. The only way to do that is to keep investing in generation and gas infrastructure so that we can increase capacity up to that level. By then, we now start talking of what is cost-reflective reflective tariff. But we've been pushing that cost-reflective tariff, which, the discourse, it's to the advantage that they keep talking about it. But it has made, because government has also muzzled in trying to determine what discos do. All of a sudden, discos don't run their businesses as private business again.
Let me jump in here, Mr. Okeke, because quite frankly, some of the key concerns you raise, for instance, we're talking about generation, and we've also seen this back and forth argument between the discos and the generation companies, sometimes talking about rejecting power. And the argument has always been that some of the discos have not invested in, revamping their infrastructure so that they can actually take some of the power that come from the gencos. Now, speak to us about this back and forth. It looks like a blame game, but Nigerians are still a little bit in the dark as to what exactly that is about.
That's true. The reality is, you have to ask yourself, privatization of the distribution companies, did the right investors buy it? That's where we have to start. Because unfortunately, a lot of people that came into the sector looked at it as if they were going to realize their money within 2 or 3 years. That never happens in an industry like the power industry. We are supposed to invest in, acquire these assets, invest in revamping their infrastructure. That never happened. So what you've seen is that almost all the discos, I can't think of fresh injection of fund they've made. So the power that is being generated, on one hand, you can say that there's rejection of load, yes, but it depends on how you term it. Now, if you are taking load to some areas where the infrastructure is not there, let me use an example. There was something we did in Aba some years back. We are interested in looking at. We are looking at Aba. Aba has capacity only for 90 megawatts. You know that Aba, the need in Aba, the demand in Aba is much more than that. So if you push in more than 90 megawatts, the DISCO is going to reject it. It does not mean that Aba indigenes don't need more than 90 megawatts. Right. But if you haven't invested in taking more than 90 megawatts, they're going to just reject the load. And that's what's happening.
Do we have Dr. Sam Amadi in our offsite studio? Fantastic. Dr. Sam, look, we've eaten up some time already. Let's move to the future. We could spend all night talking about all that's gone wrong. Well, President-elect Bola Tinubu is promising cost-reflective tariff, which Mr. Okeke here says nobody's really asking what exactly that is about. He says he will put an end to estimated billing. He'll fix, rural electrification, closing Nigeria's electricity metering gap, on and on and on. How can Tinubu realize this beautiful ambition for the power sector? In fact, he says, look, after 4 years, if I don't fix the prepaid metering and all of that, just boot me out.
Okay, I think it's first. I think the president needs to have, or president-elect rather, needs to have first a theory of change. What's the problem? I've read through the document. What I think missing is a proper description of the problem. Look, the issue about estimated billing, issues around gas to power, issues around manufacturing of meter. They are just small piece of a central problem. Edu talked about privatization and those who bought assets. I think that the first job is to reconceptualize the roadmap and the policy, the NEP, the National Electric Power Policy. This was done 15, 20-something years ago when there was so much what you call market fundamentalism. The idea that markets, private sector will fix everything. Now, you need to now rethink it and say, okay, what should government do, what should private sector do? That's number one. Number two is that, look, cost-effective tariff is not the answer or the main problem. The main problem is, can you streamline the value chain in a way that you reduce efficiency and create complementarity? So, for example, if, like Edu says, you are helping them generate more, at the same time, the disco end has capacity to take in more because investments are coming in. So I think that what the Print should do is first, in panel group of clear-headed experts to review the Bodo roadmap, the NEP, the National Electric Power Policy, and the Act. Two, to identify what's the overarching problem. And for me, I think we made a mistake in the fluency of our reform. The first thing after unbundling was to fully commercialize. Egypt has commercialized to a large extent. They have not yet privatized. So they rush to privatize without first commercializing, corporatizing, and incentivizing efficiency in the value chain is the problem. Because look, there's no appetite, no financial depth to manage 11 discos from a private sector point of view. Who's going to come from Europe, from Asia, where they have deeper markets, to come and buy assets in Nigeria at the way we did it in one fell swoop? If we had started with small, phased-in privatization, and people like Edu are helped to produce more, and the transition is being improved, then gradually you see uptick, will keep improving and improving, and those other public entities will privatize by themselves, and then you don't have to go into private sector. You have to go into a market-based operation where those who can do private sector can do. Government itself has to be commercially run and managed. So there's nothing really anathema about government owning assets. I give an example. Yola Disco, when it was bought by private sector, the private sector, they didn't manage it well. They handed it over. Then when government appointed government managers, we saw improvement in revenue collection and even improvement in management efficiency. So I think the orthodoxy that the answer to our power sector is to privatize was a mistake. The answer is commercialization, imbuing efficiency, liberalizing, allowing private sector to play a role, at the same time strategically ensure
Dr. Amadi,
that you build towards efficiency.
Just allow me, Button, quickly, apologies, because we're almost running out of time. And, well, listening to you and Mr. Okeke, I think you've stated almost everything. It's a potpourri of issues. But let me take this to you, and it reminds me of back in the day where you were at NEC, the Regulatory Commission. Some have also said NEC is also a part of the problem because the consumer, the end user, are still crying out. We have three kinds of thieves now. Those are the words in the power sector. The customer who shortchanges the system, and the disco also who shortchanges the customer. So what does NEC do in this place? For instance, looking at big cities like Abuja and some other places, NEC hasn't actually spoken on behalf of these people. Speak to us on what NEC should be doing to give that kind of confidence to the consumer.
Absolutely, good question. First, in our time, the first job NEC had to do, we did it well, which is set up regulation for market to develop. Now, NEC should come into the role of protecting customer more. But let me put this. Part of what the new government should strive for is to unbundle NEC. You see, customer care should be at the level of states. In the US, for example, equivalent of NEC, which is FAC, manages transmission, but allows states, the PCUs, state public commissions, to manage retail end of customer care. Look at NEC in Abuja. When I was NEC chairman, I set up zonal offices. Today, those offices are no more. How will NEC manage retail violation of customer care in rural areas? So I'm proposing that you allow NEC manage economic regulation, manage transmission and that, but allow states to, based on NEC regulations, to administer customer care, because this is retail. It's at a doorpost. So you will see efficiency in improvement in entities, discos, improving their services when state PCUs or PSCs are the ones who are using next regulation to enforce compliance. So I think we need to unbundle by allowing states to now go into distribution, and based on the new regulation that the president has signed, the new constitution, states should form their own customer protection agencies so that NEC focuses on economic incentive and deepening market transformation.
Very well said, gentlemen. I must say, my parents shouted up NEPA, I shouted up NEPA, my children shouted up NEPA, grandkids are also saying apapa. Thank you very much, guys. Edu Okeke is MD Azura Power, and Dr. Sam Amadi, a RISE analyst and former chairman, NERC. Thank you for joining us on Newsnight tonight.